This is the Open Floor NBA podcast. We talk about the league and all the big stories going on in it. Joining me, as she does every week, from Fox Sports 1, All the Smoke, Monumental Sports Network, and right here every week on the show, the great Rachel Nichols. And Rachel, we thought maybe in the morning hours we might have something big to talk about. Well, there was at least the possibility that
this is how you know that the NBA hasn't really gotten going yet.
I know. The possibility that LeBron James was going to announce something significant. He teased it on Monday night. The decision, part 2, turns out to be just another marketing campaign, this time for Hennessy whiskey. So I guess it worked. We gave them a quick plug, but a lot of pissed off people, I think, on social media, Rachel, after the fact. But you're right. We shouldn't have expected anything more than that, because I think you and I both know when LeBron decides to hang him up, it's going to be a lot bigger than this. Like it's not going to be just kind of a social media tease that, results in him saying, this is my final season. Like that's not how this is going to go down.
Especially in the middle of the second week of training camp. I have 2 TV news outlets I work for regularly who called me yesterday about, okay, what time can we have you on after he makes the announcement? And I was just like, guys, it's an ad. It's an ad. It's an ad. Because we've actually seen this from LeBron himself before. Him sort of tease something and then 24 hours later it's an ad. I think this time
last year we literally saw it.
Right? and I think this time the use of the decision too, right? But even that told me, okay, it's an ad, because he would never call a major thing. If he really was making a major career landmark, he would never call it the decision to, because he has said multiple times that doing that special was a mistake. So, obviously someone decided it would be a fun thing to market. He agreed to it. I don't know if in hindsight they're going to, think that was the right idea, but there you go. That's what we got. We got that non-decision decision, which is what anybody who has been watching LeBron for a long time had expected. I do think it's going to be very interesting to see how this season plays out for him and what happens afterward, because nothing is normal about this situation. We have a over 40 player playing at an all NBA level. We have a team that isn't trying to hold on to the last, milking the last little bit of greatness out of him, because they've already intellectually moved on to their younger star who they think has all the potential to be just as good a player. And we have this looming sort of possibility of an international league that LeBron, his business partner Maverick Carter, may be involved with, that is sort of more of like a live golf for basketball is how it's been pitched to me. And, is LeBron going to, at the end of the season, stay with the Lakers? Is he going to retire? Is he going to go to another NBA team? Or maybe he's going to go play European basketball for, 1 or 2 weeks every 2 or 3 months in some fabulous, Monaco style location.
So I wasn't going to go here, but I have been talking, in the last few days about, to people about this European venture that LeBron seems to be on with Maverick Carter. They, in a very high profile way, talked to Nikola Jokic about this. It's just interesting to me. Like, LeBron has made no secret of his ambition to be an NBA owner, specifically an owner of a Las Vegas expansion team, which there's going to be a team in Vegas, most likely one way or the other, whether it's relocation, expansion. There are probably some concerns in the NBA about this downturn in Vegas lately, which is real. I go to Vegas all the time. It's gotten really expensive to go out there for everything, anything from hotel rooms to meals to bottles of water that you buy. It's ridiculously pricey now in Las Vegas. But you cover LeBron longer than I have. You know him pretty well. It's interesting to me that he's doing this because the NBA wants to make their NBA Europe League happen. And it's going to happen. Like, there's going to be a European League. Why would LeBron want to butt heads with the NBA? Why would he want to go head to head with the league that he's, nominally trying to be a part of long after his playing days are over? What's your theory on that? Do you have one?
Yeah, I mean, look, first of all, we don't know exactly what this venture in Europe from sort of the Maverick LeBron group is going to be. We don't know exactly who's going to have ownership. Is LeBron going to have any ownership in that? Is it going to be sort of two layers, deeper or further away from him? We don't know. I do know that the conversations haven't been about a sort of day-to-day basketball league, the way the NBA has, the way the NBA has been talking about having in Europe. The style of the conversations that they've been having with some of the people in Europe that I have spoken to have been more of a live golf kind of, hey, or F1 kind of, if that's a better comp for people. We barrel into some very glamorous European city. They play in that city for a week or whatever it is. There's games between different teams in one stationary place. It's glamorous. There's fabulous restaurants. There's fabulous sponsors. There's fabulous tents of people doing fabulous things. And then everybody goes home for whether it's 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever it is. And then they go to some other fabulous city and do that. Obviously, F1, goes every week, but you know what I mean? The style would be a little bit different than sort of a day-to-day league. NBA Europe is talking about a day-to-day league. The NBA we have here is obviously a day-to-day league. So the idea that's been tossed around to people in Europe that I have spoken to, and again, I haven't had a direct conversation with LeBron and Maverick, and I have not sat down and discussed their business plan, so I want to make that clear. But the conversations that I've talked to with people they've talked to have been sort of this more sort of big picture kind of thing that is different from what the NBA might be starting to do in Europe, which is more of a competition of Eurobasket, from what I understand.
Different, I guess. There still would be, I think, some crossover between the two.
Yeah, no, I'm sure there is, and they're looking. I think it's an interesting thing that we've gotten to this point in the NBA, whether it's because of the increased fitness, which we've never seen athletes retiring at sort of the level of fitness that they are when they play. We have this generation of NBA players, unlike any generation that has quite played before them in terms of Chris Paul still believes he can play. He's still on an NBA roster. LeBron James still on an NBA roster. You've guys who still feel they can play. Even Dwayne Wade, who isn't playing anymore. If you said, hey, you want to play once a month? You want to play once every 6 weeks? You want to come in as a guest person every once in a while and play? I just think that you have a generation of players who are huge global names who may or may not, in different cases, still be playing in the NBA and think, what if next year or 2 years from now, I just play it every once in a while instead of every day? Would that sort of be able to, extend my career in a different way going forward? And what if it was really glamorous? So it didn't feel like some has-been league or like, he can't hack it in the NBA anymore. Now he's got to go play here. What if it felt like some glamorous, cool thing that these cool kids got to go do over in these cool cities? So again, I have not sat down with LeBron James and Maverick Carter. I do not know what their business plan is, but I do know that that's been some of the discussions. And when they were seen overseas over the summer, it was talking to Nikola Jokic's agent. And the reason they were talking to his agent, or at least the speculated reason, is he represents a lot of players in Europe, not just Jokic. So there's other players that might come into play here as well. And I just think it's going to be interesting to see with LeBron bringing it back to him, himself. How do the Lakers do this season? They could win a title this season, and this whole conversation becomes a different conversation. They could sort of fall apart in a way we don't expect. LeBron could want to trade in the middle of the season. But I just think that when we talk about what his future is like, we have to just add another extra layer than we typically add with guys when we talk about, are they going to retire or not? Because I think that there may end up being a place for him to go besides the NBA. And if that is the case, will he want to take advantage of it?
Yeah, I just think the NBA views this as encroaching a little bit. And
I don't,
I just don't know if that helps his cause to get a piece of a franchise. And there's a lot of would-be owners for a Vegas franchise. There's probably a couple for Seattle, and I think the names are probably out there. But like, as far as owning the Vegas team, like everybody wants a piece of that action. Like the teams
Chris,
that have been out there.
When do you realistically think that team might play a game? Because that has only gotten further and further away.
I think we're 5 years. 5 years, maybe. Yeah. I think in that window, like, when I think of relocation as being an option, you've got two teams with leases that expire in 2029. So, a 5-year window makes some sense either for that or getting owners to come around that it's in their best financial interest to have 32 teams, even if you do have to split the national TV pie a little bit more than you like. I think 5 years is is reasonable. That kind of puts them on track. I mean, I think a lot of people are like, 2027, they got to get there. There was a rush before this national TV deal was announced, but I think 5 years is a reasonable window.
Okay, so if you're LeBron and you do leave the NBA after this season and you go do something else over in Europe, again, hypothetically, because we don't know what's going to happen, 5 years later, come back and bid on an NBA team. That doesn't seem so crazy to me. I don't know.
But does it damage the relationship, I guess, if you're out there doing that? I mean, everything is politics, right? And owners are the ones that vote on this stuff. And are they going to look? They're trying to make money off NBA Europe. They're trying to make money off a new team or two new teams in the league. It all comes down to money in the NBA. And Adam Silver is fantastic at making the owners money. He is the best of the best, I think, when it comes to the commissioners about making. What do they say? The main thing. And the main thing is making money. The main thing is making money. I just think it's curious. I think this push from Maverick with LeBron attached to it is very curious to me why they're doing this. I'm sure we'll have plenty to talk about with that when LeBron does another Hennessy commercial next year. All right, we're gonna start the show incredibly not in the NBA. We're gonna talk a little bit about the WNBA because that is front and center right now. Not just with the WNBA finals going on, but with the escalating war between the WNBA players and WNBA management, specifically Cathy Engelbert, the WNBA commissioner. Of course, we all saw Nafisa Collier come out and just tattoo WNBA management, name-checking Cathy Engelbert, putting some private conversations out there. I don't know how I feel about that necessarily, but putting some private conversations that are out there that make Cathy look terrible. Before the WNBA finals started, Cathy Engelbert, after some disastrous answers, I thought, did deny that she said those things about Caitlin Clark and others. But it just, makes you believe that when this collective bargaining agreement expires, Rachel, at the end of October, we're not only headed for a work stoppage, we're headed for a long work stoppage between the WNBA and its players. What's been your read on how this thing has gone from brewing disdain to just palpable hatred between the players and upper management of the WNBA?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty clear, and sometimes it's not anyone's fault, but it is pretty clear that Cathy cannot be the WA commission and in the WNBA. I'm going to start all over again. If you don't mind, whoever's editing this, thanks very much. I think it's pretty clear that Cathy cannot be the WNBA commissioner for sort of the next phase of the league. After whatever labor issue happens, after a new CBA is signed, I do not expect Cathy to be the commissioner of the WNBA. The question to me is, will she remain the commissioner through negotiations? Because there's two strategies. There's two ways that league officials and ultimately Adam Silver and the NBA, which own the league, can sort of play this. Either Cathy can stay commissioner through the negotiations. She can be the bad guy, right? The sort of, oh yeah, she's our enemy. She's the one we're negotiating against. She's the one who doesn't want us to have anything. And then whenever those sort of negotiations, wherever point that they reach, then you have someone new come in and say, well, I'm not the one who fought you on the CBA. I'm not the one part of this old era. It's a new era in the W with a new commissioner, that sort of thing. Or it's possible that the relationship is so soured and that things are so negative that the NBA has to remove her as commissioner before or during the negotiations just to get a deal done. And that's really, to me, where I think the question is. It's not, can she move forward for years and years to come as the W commissioner? Because I just think that ship has sailed. I think the question is, do they keep her on through the negotiations sort of as a way to have her finish up what is clearly going to be a negative process and then move on with someone new and fresh? Or do they need to replace her before that just to make progress with the players? Because whatever has actually happened, and there are now conflicting sides and conflicting stories, the relationship has been damaged beyond repair. We talk about this with coaches, right? When a coach has lost the locker room to this degree, she has lost the locker room of the WNBA. And regardless of what is or isn't fair or has or hasn't happened, she just can't continue as this league continues forward into a new era.
Okay, I don't disagree that Cathy Engelbert has made a lot of mistakes in her time as commissioner. I think as far as communication goes, she sucks. She is not a good communicator. And that press conference was just such a train wreck in a lot of ways. It surprised me because she had to know what was coming and to to seemingly be that unprepared for some of the questions surprised me a little bit. I would note, I don't know that Cathy Engelbert in the WNBA's position is necessarily wrong. I mean, I thought the New York Times did a pretty good job of laying out the state of the WNBA finances. The WNBA does not make money. It is not a profitable league. It has not been since its inception. It is subsidized by the NBA, which owns 42% of the WNBA. So while we can all get on board with this idea that women's salaries in the WNBA need to be increased significantly, given the rise in television revenue, the idea that there should be a NBA type split or something close to it of the revenue is nonsensical. Like the WNBA, they don't release their official numbers, but from what I've been told, like their revenue is anywhere from like $500 to $800 million per year. Put that in contrast to the NBA, which has total revenue of $11.3 billion. Like you can't run a league by doing some kind of 50-50 split with the WNBA and its players. So that's kind of a long way of saying, like, I think the NBA certainly chafes at the relationship and the dynamic between Cathy and the players. I think Adam Silver said as much, says it's gotten too personal between the WNBA and its players. I also think that the WNBA thinks that its leader's position is the right one and that she's steering these negotiations in a proper financial way. So I don't know, like maybe it has gotten so ugly that we've reached the point of no return with Cathy Engelbert that she can't function in a league where 100% of the star players think she's an idiot and don't want to be around her anymore. But I don't think she's wrong, Rachel, and I don't think the WNBA is necessarily wrong. Like I've seen some social media clips, like Sophie Cunningham had one from her podcast recently where a co-host asked her like where all the money's going. What money? Like what? There's no money to kind of go around. There's no profits to be distributed around. So I think that while Cathy's had some issues and certainly has made a mess of it in her own right, I think the WNBA players are not exactly. I don't think they're articulating the right way the finances of the league in the way that's factually accurate.
But you have to understand there's two issues going on here and they're related, but they are separate. So one is the money, right? And look, we hear this when the NBA is in negotiations with its players association. You and I have been around for not just the recent negotiations, which have been a little bit more la-di-da and happy between the parties, but you and I have seen some very ugly negotiations.
Oh, yeah.
Years with the NBA Players Association and the NBA. And one of the calls of any players association on either side, the men's or the women's, has been open the books. You say you're losing money, let us see. Open the books. And that is a discussion that is still going on right now between the W and its players. And that is part of the financial issue that you just addressed. On the other side, there is a lot more than money going on in any professional sports league. Sure. Ultimately, it's about the money, but especially when you have a league that is in the middle of this incredible growth spurt, and so much is on the players themselves to sort of shoulder the growth of the league and provide so much of outreach and sort of the way the league goes moving forward. You have to have the league office have a good relationship with players. And that's not just la-di-da, we all have to be friends because we're girls. That's not it. That is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about you have to listen to players when they feel their safety is at stake. And that has been a huge issue. You have to listen to players about officiating. And again, I don't like that foul was called on me, but the overall way that the game has gotten to a point and a direction that the players playing in it don't feel comfortable with.
It's too physical. It's too physical, the WNBA right now.
You know, Sue Bird was talking on her podcast earlier this week about how she was on one of those committees. And was it a competition committee? Was it this committee? I don't know. We have 17,000 committees in the W and in the NBA, but she was on one of those player commissions that has the the relationship with the owners to talk about league rules and things. And she said, I don't understand. We play a 40-minute game. Why are there 6 fouls? There should be 5 fouls. If there were 5 fouls, people would think about those fouls differently. I argued for it for 10 years when I was in the W. I don't understand. That would solve so many things now. The idea that the W leadership I don't know if they're not listening to players, but that's certainly what the players think. The players feel they're not being listened to about things as significant as their own health and safety. They feel like they're not being listened to in terms of the different ways the league is run, who's in charge of what kinds of direction and decisions are being made. And then also the tone. Your point about, oh, gee, I don't know if the private conversation between Cathy and Nafisa Collier that happened 10 months ago or 8 months ago, whatever it was, should have been made public. But the reason Nafisa Collier made those comments public wasn't to tell on Cathy. If she was, she would have done that 8 or 9 months ago. In fact, there's been reporting since she gave that press conference and since Cathy said, oh, I never said that, that never happened, that Fee had told people around her of that conversation at the time. So this isn't something that 6 months later, she just sort of woke up and said, I'm going to say that Cathy Engelbert said this. At the time, she had told people around her, this is what Cathy said to me. And the reason why she finally, months and months later, shared that publicly was to demonstrate what the players feel is that they are looked down upon, that they are told you are just lucky to be here, that they are told you better thank, when that quote, if that quote is accurate, and I obviously wasn't in the room, so I can't say, but if the quote is accurate of they should get down on their knees, if that's the language that was used,
wild,
cannot say that. And that is as much of an issue as the money. Maybe, ultimately the money is always the issue, but that is a huge, huge part of this. And I just don't think that could be ignored. And I want you to imagine if that quote was supposedly said by Adam Silver about NBA players.
Well, and remember, Rachel, you talked about hostile negotiations. I remember I think it was Ken Berger had the executive quoted back. You remember this 2011 where it was like, if LeBron wants to go play football, let him go play football. Like, this kind of stuff.
That is a lot different from they should be down on their knees.
Right.
Thank you. Right. I mean, I just want to, again, I was not in the room. I don't know for sure that Cathy said that, but Nafisa Collier says that she said it, and she told a bunch of people at the time, months and months earlier, that Cathy said it. If that quote actually happened, I want you to imagine Adam Silver saying that about NBA players. I mean, he would be gone. Right?
Gone.
Can you imagine?
Gone. You can't say
they
stuff
should be
like
down on their knees thanking me.
I completely agree. Like whether Cathy thought she was, it was public or private, on the record, off the record, doesn't matter. You can't say stuff like that. Every commissioner has had some, privately. I mean, I've talked to commissioners. They've had some. They're more frank and forthright in private than they are in public. If it's off the record, they're going to say some things in a manner that they would never say publicly. But I agree with you 100%. You cannot speak that way and expect to maintain the respect of the players that you are overseeing. So I guess it really is two different conversations. It is one, can you regain or reclaim the respect of the players in your league? That seems like that ship has long since sailed at this point. I think the financial part is a different conversation, though. I don't think that the WNBA players are. I just don't think they're negotiating in a reality. I don't think they're dealing with the real numbers to all this. The WNBA is a money loser. It has been, again, since its beginning. It is starting to creep out of that. In the years to come, as this TV deal grows and grows, it's going to increase the revenue more and more. Caitlin Clark was the first, but there's going to be more Caitlin Clarks. There's Paige Buchers down in Texas. There's women across the WNBA that are establishing themselves as draws, as attractions. Angel Reese, many others out there. I'm not a WNBA avid watcher, so I only know like the top 5 or 6 that are in the WNBA right now. But this league is going to continue to grow. But for right now, like the idea that the percentage splits should come close to or mirror the NBA's, that's just not possible with the revenue that they bring in. So
again, though, it's going to be the same thing that the men say. The same thing that the men say when there is a contentious CBA negotiation. And again, we haven't seen that in a couple of CBAs, but what do they say? Open the books. You say you're losing money? Show us how you're.
Well, it was a little bit different back then too, but because the NBA was trying to claw back some of the revenue that they had given the players in the past. The WNBA women are trying to gain some. I think they're only like 10% or something like that of total revenue, which is ridiculous. Like nobody's saying you shouldn't, that the explosive growth of the league as of late shouldn't trickle down to the players. Of course it should. Nobody wants to see millionaire and billionaire owners get richer. Nobody gives a damn. It's the product that's out there. These women deserve most of the money. I just think that there's and you can't, Rachel, look at some of the valuations that have been out there are a little bit crazy. I don't think that the Connecticut Sun, and we've talked about this, are worth the 300 something million that Steve Pagliuca was trying to buy her. I think Steve Pagliocca woke up after the Celtics were sold and was like, you know what? I got a whole pile of money and I want to own an NBA team in the Boston area. I'm going to go down and drive the Connecticut Sun out of that high school gym that they're playing in down in Connecticut and bring them up to Boston, build a facility. In some ways, it's like a rich guy wanting to own something. And this is the most available thing that's out there. So I don't look at the team valuations as being like this a way to project or forecast how much money that the league is bringing. I think they're overpaying for some of these teams right now.
But that doesn't matter, Chris. If someone's willing, it's like real estate. If someone's willing to pay for it, that's how much they're valued at. Also, again, I always think it's a little dangerous for anyone on the outside, or frankly on either side, to start making these huge pronouncements about how much money there is, how much money there isn't. Owners in any sport can claim losses, tax losses, because it's more beneficial for their overall company when they own 3 different teams and the building and the restaurants and this, and they claim losses in certain areas to offset losses in other areas. And then is the labor that is negotiating with them, negotiating against those losses. Should they be negotiating against those losses, or should they be negotiating against the money that they bring in? This is a lot more complicated than sort of, 10 sentences from us on a podcast. And I just think that to understand that there are complex financial issues going on, and then there are complex issues on how the league is run. And that's what, if you listen to the women speaking right now, that is a lot of what they are talking about. They are talking about leadership at the league level. That is what we heard from Cheryl Reeve. That is what we heard from Nafisa Collier, who, by the way, has major injuries resulting from the incident that Cheryl Reeve was so upset about in the first place. This is going to affect her for the next year and a half. So I just think that the players are looking for communication in a different way than they've gotten it, leadership in a different way that they've gotten it, respect in a different way that they've gotten it. The fact that you had so many former players chiming in, not just current players, Angel Reese saying 10 out of 10 no notes, or Caitlin Clark backing up Nafisa Collier. You had former players, Elena Delle Donne, who is the WNBA champion, former MVP, saying, I don't think Cathy Engelbert knows I'm retired. I heard from everybody else except for her when I left the game. I didn't hear from her when I got hurt, all of the other stuff. Players don't feel like they have a real working relationship with the W League office, and that just doesn't work. It just doesn't work long term. Again, it's like losing the locker room. At some point, no matter who's at fault, sometimes coaches aren't at fault, but they lose the locker room and you got to move on.
Yeah, I think we're in for a very long work stoppage. I actually don't think this is going to get resolved. I mean, a lot can change, but these women now have other options. The Unrivaled League is paying them some money. There are still some overseas options. They have the ability now to hold out a little bit longer. I just like to see the focus on forgetting the percentage of revenue. Like, let's get some of these numbers up. Let's get minimum salaries over 6 figures. Let's get maximum salaries at $1 million. Let's get these numbers higher than what they are, and worry about, splits of revenue when there actually is real revenue, over multi-billion dollars in the years to come. All right, let's talk some NBA here. And we've got to, once again, talk about Giannis, because why not? I didn't wake up this morning, Rachel, thinking we were going to discuss Giannis, but Shams Charania over at ESPN had a report out there that the Milwaukee Bucks talked to the New York Knicks this summer about a Giannis deal. This is after the Bucks had a conversation with Giannis and his representative over the summer about, his potential future in Milwaukee. Giannis again reiterated, I want to win a championship, and according to ESPN, told them maybe start exploring some stuff that's out there. How big is this? And how significant do you think this is, that the door is just pushed open a little bit further on a Giannis trade from Milwaukee?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's all interesting. What's really going to matter, though, is does Giannis ask for a trade before this year's trade deadline? That's it, right? That's the question. Because I think the Bucks have made it clear that certainly if they're not getting a Godfather-style offer, which according to this article, they weren't getting from the Knicks, but maybe even if they do get a Godfather-style offer, that they are not going to willingly, without Giannis telling them to, trade Giannis. So I think it comes down to, how does this season start for the Bucks? Giannis, on the one hand, we're hearing, he wanted to explore a trade to the Knicks, and he says, I never had a conversation with ownership. And there's a lot of sort of Should we read tea leaves that he's leaving quotes? And then, as you and I discussed last week, there are just as many quotes from him saying, I think this is one of the best rosters I've ever had. He's talking about how he's more excited about this team than he's ever been. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but I read you the exact quote last week. I'm sure we can find it again. He's been overwhelmingly positive at times about the Bucks. I think it is going to come down to how do they do in this watered down Eastern Conference? And how does Giannis feel about that going into February? And then also, what teams have left things open? And part of what that article was discussing was that the Knicks long have known they are maybe a possibility in the back of Giannis's mind, right? That the Knicks have been one of the teams he himself has brought up. He's talked about how much he loves New York. You saw him in New York this offseason. There were pictures of him with the stroller going down the street. Have teams left enough room? And it's a little bit goes back to this LeBron conversation we were having at the beginning of the pod about the Lakers making it clear they want to leave room next summer. They don't want to commit or extend LeBron right now because they want to leave room. What if Giannis Antetokounmpo wants to come pair up with Luka Doncic? The Knicks, as discussed in this ESPN article, did not necessarily leave as much room when they put together a bunch of assets to go get Mikal Bridges. So it is going to be an interesting question of, does Giannis want to leave Milwaukee? That's question number one. Does he want to leave just to go anywhere? Or does he want to leave to only go to certain cities? Because when he has talked about possibly leaving, it really hasn't been as much about basketball fit. Yes, he said, I want to win a title. I want to go to somewhere I can win a title. I want to win more championships. I don't think I'm done. But he's talked a lot about cities, right? Oh, I want to play in an international city. You know, who has a flight to Greece? Who has this? You know, what's an international city? I haven't played in a city like New York or LA, I believe he said even at one point. And does he want to leave Milwaukee? Number one. Number two, does he want to go where it's possible for the Bucks to make a trade for him to go to? And who of the teams competing for him has the room to take on the salary that he's going to demand? And, you know, not just now, but in the future.
This is the last season Giannis plays in Milwaukee.
It might be.
I feel very strong about that because next summer, when he's got 1 year left on his deal, all he has to do is turn down a contract extension. That carries the same weight as a trade demand. We've seen it time and time again because no team in their right mind is going into a walk year with an asset like Giannis Antetokounmpo. It's simple as that.
Absolutely.
I kicked the tires a little bit on this report on Tuesday morning. And, you know, a couple things that came back was, one, these talks, they began pretty late in the offseason. Like that, you know, the Knicks and teams out there were, not that they wouldn't have upset the apple cart to go and get a guy like Giannis, but, you know, they were pretty set with their rosters at that point. So it was, the timing of it was a little bit difficult. What also came back to me from a couple of people around the league that have interest in Giannis is that it's not 3 years ago. Like, even though you'd be able to re-sign Giannis, presumably, he's going to be 31 years old in December. And he's got the type of game that, look, it's unbelievable how he's playing. And he's still one of the best two-way player in basketball, though Victor Wembanyama is going to give him his run for his money probably this year. But there are teams wondering how his game is going to age. You know, he's not become a perimeter threat. In fact, he's gone the other direction. He's just not shown any interest whatsoever in evolving his game. And look, he's still been an MVP candidate year after year without a three-point shot. So that's to his credit. But, you know, when I talk to some teams, and I talk to people that know about these Knicks and Bucks talks, you know, one thing was like, you know, the Knicks don't have a ton anyway because of what you said, the moves that they've made. Would the Knicks want to go all in and trade everything for Giannis regardless? I'm not so sure anymore. Like, they might have wanted to do it a couple of years ago, but look, this is a team with finals aspirations. Like, they've got a group that was a couple of games away from the finals last year. They feel like they addressed the problem with Mike Brown. Not so sure about that. I mean, it's not going to get into this, but all this talk about the free-flowing Knicks offense, like, how long does that last when, like, Jalen Brunson's like, give me the damn ball, and I'm just going to continue to be the all-NBA, all-star starting guard that I was in years past? Neither here nor there. But anyway, I just think that, you know, teams are still going to want Giannis and want to give up a lot to go and get him. It's not the same as it was 3 years ago. It's not. He's a little bit older. He's still durable. He's still a guy you can count on. He's still a guy that's going to be an MVP candidate probably for the next 2 or 3 years, but it's not the next 5 or 6 years. And I think there are real questions about, like, you know, if his athleticism wanes a little bit, is his game going to mature? Like I saw him at Eurobasket and he was shooting more, I thought, in some of those games. So maybe that's like the next level. He's not going to become Dirk Nowitzki. Maybe he becomes more of an accomplished mid-range shooter that can score out of the post that way. But I just think that when the time comes, whenever it comes, and I think the latest is going to come is next summer, what are teams going to be willing to give up to get age 32 Giannis Antetokounmpo going into his age 32 season? Like, does that make any sense? Like, I think that there's the asking the potential to get a lot for him, or to get incredible record breaking Paul George type packages back in return. The clock's certainly ticking on that type of situation.
Yes, I think that it is different to be trading for a 31, 32-year-old Giannis Antetokounmpo than, say, a 27 or 28-year-old Antetokounmpo, but it's still going to be a massive haul. I just believe that, because, again, you only need one. And I don't know where Giannis is going to put his foot down and say, here is my list of cities if we get to that point, and I will only go to these cities because those are the only cities I will sign an extension with. But also, as we saw with Kawhi Leonard, when a player is good enough, when they are so elite that they literally change the chemistry of what you can do out on the court, there may be a team like the Toronto Raptors at the time that say, great, we know he's not going to sign an extension with us. We're still going to take him for a year, and we're still going to give up a lot for him.
Raptors might be that team.
They could be that team. I mean, they've wanted him for a long time. Obviously, different management there now, but still. I mean, I just think that he is such a talent. He is a guy who, frankly, if we hadn't seen a historic MVP competition between Nikola Jokic and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander last year, Giannis could have easily won MVP last year. His numbers were better than his MVP season. So I just think that he is going to be an enormous subject of interest if he decides he wants to leave Milwaukee, either by asking for a trade before February, or, as you point out, not signing an extension with them next summer. But it is going to be an interesting question of how small is the list of teams where he wants to go? Do they have the room financially and physically on their roster to give up everything that Milwaukee will demand that they give up? And you know, the Knicks example here is just so fascinating because it is the team that he's flirted with the most, or the most sort of buzz and conversations have been about. But again, as Shams pointed out in that article, they don't really have the asset structure right now to make that kind of deal in a way Milwaukee would want to make it. And in the end, they're the ones making the deal, not Giannis.
Okay, I think a lot of it comes down to, do we take Giannis at his word that winning a championship is the biggest priority? Because if it is, that list does expand beyond New York and Los Angeles. Like, I think Houston is a team that's in play. Like the Rockets, I thought Rafael Stone did a really good job of giving up a lot to get Kevin Durant, but not giving up the store. Like, they still have enough left in the war chest, both in terms of players and draft capital, to make an offer that would be really appealing to Milwaukee. Like, if they came to the table with Alperen Sengun, Reed Shepherd, some of that Phoenix draft capital that they still have left, it's pretty good. Reed Shepherd, even though he was kind of an enigma last year, still the third overall pick from the 24 draft. Alperen Sengun is an all-star and looks like he can be an all-star for years to come. And look, the Suns are going nowhere. So if you can get their first-round draft pick, then hey, all of a sudden you're in play for a rebuilding package. So look, and if you're Giannis, plug Giannis onto Houston with Kevin Durant, with Amen Thompson, and with whatever they get to fill up around him. That's a great team. That's a great team ready to win right now, because then Amen will be a year older and a year better and probably on his way to an all-NBA team. So you got three guys that are, probably going to be elite at their respective positions. That's a pretty good nucleus to build around.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think there's one priority for a lot of these players, especially the most elite of the elite players. I think it's a bunch of things. Do you want to win? Yes, of course you want to win. You don't get to the point of being Giannis Antetokounmpo, especially him who started from where he started from and had to work to get to where he is more than almost any other guy in the league. You're not that person and don't want to win. That's not a huge priority for you. So of course it is. However, also, he's a family guy. He talks all the time about his family and what he wants for them and where he wants them to be. Also, he is a marketing guy. He is a guy who knows that being where he has been, and being a big man, right? Big men don't get marketed in the league quite the way guards are, has been a little bit of him not getting the attention that he thinks he should be getting. So if he is in New York City, if he is in Los Angeles? Is that going to be different than being in Houston, even though Houston is obviously a much larger metropolitan area and has a much bigger ratings base and fan base, sort of just size-wise, than Milwaukee? Is Houston enough of an upgrade in that category that he doesn't want to be, I want to be in the major advertising market like LA or New York? There's so many factors with Giannis. I think we just have to wait and see what he prioritizes. And it might not just be one thing. It's probably going to be a combination of things.
Do you think that
and it
matters?
might be staying in Milwaukee.
Like, do you think that I know. Do you think the marketing stuff matters? I mean, I'm not to parrot the old Adam Silver line. Sounds like I'm a company man here for the NBA, but the NBA has made this big deal out of the fact that, like, yeah, you don't get as much media in Oklahoma City or Houston or Milwaukee, but in terms of national sponsorship, national brands, it doesn't really matter anymore. Hell, the Thunder I can't turn on my TV without seeing a Thunder commercial with all those guys.
And by the way, Russell Westbrook in Oklahoma City was sort of the bellwether breakthrough of that, right? Yep. I don't know if you remember that commercial. It was after Kevin Durant left. Perhaps it was pointed where he said, "Some run, others create runways," right? I believe that was the quote.
You think?
Yeah, I think. And it was this huge national Nike commercial. It played everywhere. And it was sort of the ultimate retort to, hey, you don't need to be in a huge market. And I think that is correct. I do also think that times have changed even since then. And these players don't want to just get into, I want a Nike ad on TV during basketball games. They want international finance opportunities. They want to be involved with big fashion companies and name the creative director of such and such huge global billion-dollar fashion brand. There are certain relationships that you get with people who are courtside at Knicks games, at Lakers games, being in that area on your off day, even not on your off day, after practice. You can have a regular practice day, go through a really hard workout, do all your stuff, and still be able to have a 3:30 p.m. meeting with a big time head of a company doing something else. You're not getting that if you're in certain other markets. So I don't, I'm not saying, again, I've been the drumbeat of he should stay in Milwaukee for as long as he feels that he can, because I think that relationship with the community is so special. But when he does look at other things that may be important to him, there's a reason you've heard New York and LA come out of his mouth over and over and over again. It's because those are the cities that offer some of the other things that he is interested in.
Yeah, and look, we saw LeBron do it towards the end. LeBron went to a Lakers team that had nothing going for it at the time. That was a very average team, but he did that for off-the-court reasons, to do all the things that you are laying out there, to have those kind of meetings. Tough in traffic, though. You get practice 3:30 meeting. You never know when you cut through like the 405 there. I don't know. That's tough.
You know what? When you're LeBron James and Giannis Antetokounmpo, they come to you.
Yes, that's true. That's true. They can have those meetings at the house. I just think, to put a button on it, this story does advance the conversation a little bit more. We now know that there was at least a conversation, however nominal it was, between the Knicks and the Bucks. Will more conversation take place before the deadline? I think so, because I think this first quarter of the season for Milwaukee is not going to be very good. I think they're going to be a middle-of-the-pack Eastern Conference team by the time we get to Christmas. And after the first of the year, I think those conversations are really going to start to pick up. All right, a guy that's not going to be traded anytime soon, to use that as a segue, is Victor Wembanyama, who
he is not.
Already, Rachel, got me thinking that my MVP vote is going to a San Antonio Spur once again. To recap this past week, the Spurs played an inter-squad scrimmage game, the black and silver game, and that was the first live action we've seen Wemby in since the blood clot ended his season in February. And he had this play that went viral on social media where he dribbled the ball in a transition, 2 dribbles past half court, dropped his shoulder into Luke Cornett, sent Luke Cornett flying. And Luke Cornett, 7'2", 250, just ragdolled him out of the picture, took one step and dunked it home. And everybody I know was like, whoa, what did we just see there? We just saw Victor Wembanyama do the Giannis. We saw him do what Giannis made a career out of doing, just being a bull in a china shop in transition and using his 6'11", 250-ish pound frame to get to the rim. While now Wembanyama's using his 7'4", God knows how much he weighs nowadays, frame to do the exact same thing. The next night, or a couple of nights later, in the exhibition opener, I'm watching Wemby pump fake from the 3-point line, drive and kick, play point guard sort of for the Spurs. We already know, Rachel, that this guy is the best defensive player in the league. Once he crosses 65 games, just engrave his name on that trophy right away. But is this the year that we start talking about Wembanyama as a guy that's in your top 5 for MVP?
You know, when a company does like rounds of stock offerings, especially when they're trying to raise money privately, every round of offering, I have bought as much Victor Wembanyama stock as it's possible. A year or two before got into the league, I was talking about this guy coming into the league. The minute he was drafted, I was saying, what did I say to you? I said, I anticipate that without taking into account any major injuries that might befall him, that we are going to be talking about a guy who has a career that will be top 10 of all time. I believe that then. I believe that now. His physical skills combined with his work ethic and his desire and insatiable curiosity about the game is such an incredible combination. I just don't think we've seen it before because we've never seen someone physically like him who has the talent that he has. And then again, the work ethic and curiosity. And those are two different but important things. He said when he got back in his opening press conference this preseason, he said, I don't think anyone worked harder over the offseason than I did. And I believe him. First of all, physically, he is absolutely a lot more muscular than he was when he first got into the league. And when you look at those old pictures of Giannis when he first got into the league and how scrawny he was, you can start to see, okay, Wemby could absolutely have that exact same kind of physical transformation in terms of his chest and shoulders and sort of the weight and ability he has to move that power and move through guys like Luke Cornett and anybody else in the future. And then in terms of that curiosity and insatiability of sort of learning as much as he can from as many places as he can, it was a good photo op when he was like, had his shaved head and he's in the monastery and he's learning from the monk and all of that. But guess what? That stuff is important. How you quiet your mind, how you deal with outside pressure. We saw LeBron James in his first NBA, in the NBA finals. He had the first one with the Miami Heat, not his first one ever, but the first one with the Heat, where he would go back and say afterward, hey, I didn't mentally approach those finals in the way I needed to win. Victor's already laying that groundwork. He's talked to all kinds of people who do all kinds of sports about trying to pick things up from them. And of course, then the basketball people who he's picking their minds, especially, of course, Greg Popovich, but so many others too. This kid has it. He has all of it. And every single time he starts a new season, I'm buying more stock, Chris. I'm in.
I'm in as well. I mean, you're right about that appetite for learning. When I was down there a year ago, spending some time with him for the cover of the preview last year, like he talks about, it's not just basketball stuff. Let's your point. It's not just basketball stuff he's taking things from. Like we talked for 20 minutes about him reading I think it was The Witcher, like the 6-part series on The Witcher, and like kind of what he took from that he incorporates into his everyday life, from books to movies to whatever. Like, he's just adding, he's layering on to things that are going to make him better as a basketball player. And his basketball IQ has the kind of ceiling that very few players have. Like basketball IQ is not really something you're born with. You're born with like an aptitude to pick up stuff, but you gain basketball IQ as you're experienced in the league. He's only got a year and a half of experience playing in the NBA. In the next year, 2 years, like that basketball IQ is going to go from like, where let's say it's at 20% of what it could be to like 75% of what it will be. And that's going to make him unstoppable. It's funny, like Adrian Wojnarowski said something on draft night when Wemby was during Wemby's draft. And it stuck with me because Woj is not someone prone to hyperbole when it comes to, kind of the hot take. But he said that night, he said that something to the effect of it might be 3 years before Victor is not only the best top 3 defensive player, but a top 3 offensive player. And I was like, all right, that's pretty bold to say. But now I'm like, we're in year 3. He might get there. He's already number 1 defensively. Where is he offensively? We'll see, but could be top 10, top 15 by the time he's in year 3. I just think he's poised for a ridiculous season where he's blocking everything and diversifying his game enough where he could be flirting with triple doubles on most nights. He's already going to rack up the points and the rebounds. If he's playmaking like we saw in that exhibition opener with some guys around him that can shoot a little bit, there's going to be a problem. That's a problem in San Antonio. That's a team that not only could make the playoffs, but could make some noise when they got to the playoffs.
Series A, Series B, all the offerings. I want all the stock offerings. I am buying out the max of Abel. He is it. I'm telling you, top 10 player of all time. I think that is more than on the table if he stays healthy. And I'm excited. And I think it honestly puts not pressure on the Spurs because I think that's an organization that understands how to build a championship team. I think that Victor has a lot of investment with them, that they don't have to prove a lot to him, that he already knows coming into the franchise and what he's personally experienced. And then, of course, what he grew up watching, that was his favorite team, Tony Parker and all of the people he idolized. But I do think that when you have someone who is this outrageously not just talented, but impactful already, and we know the third year is always a huge growth year in the NBA, who are you putting around him and how far are you getting? Because Victor is insatiable in terms of how much he wants to accomplish, how much he wants to learn, how much he wants to do. And I don't think he's going to be happy with yet another season that ends before the playoffs even start. So we've only seen him play, what, 5 games, right, with his starting point guard?
Yeah.
But I'm curious to see what happens from there on out. I'm curious to see who else. Do they make a big trade? Do they decide, is there pressure both internally or externally? Or are they doing well enough in the Western Conference that they make a trade midseason to see if they can sort of make more of a run and beef up the team? Because I just don't think I think his timetable is quicker than people think. And I think for all the talk about Jokic and Shea and are the Thunder going to be this young dynasty, I will just keep saying it. Victor Wembanyama is coming, people. And it is interesting to see whether the Spurs are going to put a team around him as soon as this season that is equivalent to the talent and what he is able to put out, because I just think it's limitless.
Yeah. And like they do have the pieces to be able to make a deal. They do have the draft capital. They do have the movable contracts. I would say this. There wasn't an appetite for them to move Dylan Harper before the draft. And from what I'm hearing, there's a reason why. Like, this guy is a player. This guy is going to be a very good NBA player. And like, I don't know what that means for De'Aaron Fox in the long term. Obviously, he's the starting point guard there now. You know, they brought him in to be that veteran second scorer.
They extended him.
Yeah, they extended him to a 4-year deal, max, big number. But I don't know, like I think by midseason we could be talking a lot about Dylan Harper and how he's the guy at the point guard of the future in San Antonio. I think people down there think he's that good. I think making the playoffs is I think that's the step in the right direction that Wembanyama will need to see. Like, you get into the playoffs, you get beat in the first round, whatever, it happens, your first time there. But if you can claim a 6 seed, get into the postseason, get that experience, that's a huge win for this season. All right, last thing I want to get into here is the Minnesota Timberwolves, because to me they're kind of a polarizing team. Like, Anthony Edwards is great. And I think Anthony Edwards has a chance to lead the NBA in scoring. I think he's going to have that kind of offensive year. But over the last couple of years, there has been a slow erosion of talent in Minnesota. Like, I thought, even though they made it back to the conference finals, I think you and I would agree, that was a weaker version of the Timberwolves that got to the conference finals last year than the one that got there the year before with Towns. So you take a little bit off the team with the Towns trade. That's one. Then they lose Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Nothing they could do about it. Cap rules, got to pay certain guys. They do have young players that theoretically could step in. Terrence Shannon Jr. had some flashes late last season. Jalen Clark is someone they like out in Minnesota. But there's, another veteran off that team. And this was a team that finished 6th in the final season standings last year. I look at the Timberwolves as being one of those teams that could take a small step back, not out of the postseason mix entirely, but we could see them, even with a marvelous season from Anthony Edwards, being in that play-in mix. Mike Conley, a year older, shot great from 3 last year, didn't shoot so good from 2. Is Rob Dillingham ready to step in and play a bigger role with that team? I look at Minnesota as being one of the shakier contenders in the Western Conference. How do you see them?
I think that's fair. I mean, I just think the West is so deep and there's so many teams that could come jump out. I mean, I always say it's so funny because you make it to the second round and you get knocked out in the second round and people are like, oh, they only got to the second round. Well, the next round's the conference finals. And then people are like, oh, see, they made it to the conference finals. It is a razor's edge there. And I do think that expecting the Wolves to get back a third time in a row, I'm not saying they can't do it. I'm just saying that might be an over expectation for them. There are other teams in the West that are going to be fighting for that spot. And especially if you are penciling the Thunder in as being on the other side of that Western Conference Finals equation, that is going to be a very competitive spot for all of the other teams we've been talking about to fit into being that opponent. So would I expect the Timberwolves to make a third straight conference finals? No, I don't expect that. Could they? Of course they could. But I think that you are absolutely right about the direction some of the roster has gone, even just in terms of aging, to your point about Conley. And I'm very curious to see how the maturation of this season goes for Anthony Edwards versus what happens with the roster and sort of talent level of the people around him, because he is also on his own timeline and believes that he is ready to be, in his words, the best player in the league. And so I'm curious to sort of see what happens there with any frustration he might have if they don't have the start that he expects. It's something to keep an eye on as well.
They're a little bit like the Nuggets of last year, where the Nuggets were really solid with their starting lineup, but among the reasons they didn't advance as far as they'd hoped was because the young players weren't ready. And that's why the Nuggets went out this offseason and brought a whole bunch of veteran guys to supplant those young players at key positions. The Timberwolves need these young players to be ready. They need Dillingham to be ready to be 25 plus minutes per night at the point guard position. They need Terrence Shannon Jr. to be able to be the defensive 3-and-D type of guy that Nickeil Alexander-Walker was. Jalen Clark at least be part of the rotation. Even Yohan Beringer, who had 14 points in the preseason opener. Maybe he's got to give them some minutes as a backup big in that front court. They need to be able to rely on these guys. Starting lineup is still pretty good. Conley's okay. He's going to need to be rested and managed throughout the course of the season to keep him at full strength. Anthony Edwards is great. Naz Reid is great. Julius Randle is a bucket. I think Rudy continues to erode a little bit. He's no longer the defensive player of the year frontrunner he's been in the past. But he's still capable of being an anchor on your defense. This team's going to go as far as those bench guys go. You can't be burning Anthony Edwards out for 37 minutes a night. You can't be burning Naz Reid out for 35. You can't be burning Randle up for 35 plus. You need to have these young guys in there contributing, so you don't have to do that with these guys going to the playoffs.
The Timberwolves, to me, are at the exact breaking point level of where Western teams are frustrated with the imbalance of these two conferences. Because if the Minnesota Timberwolves were in the East, how do you think they'd do this season, Chris?
They'd be the number one seed. Or at least if not the number one seed, they'd be the most feared team going to the playoffs.
Right? And this is a team that will, just odds-wise, just literally numbers odds-wise, will likely take a playoff step back this year. And if they were in the East, they could easily make it to the finals.
So are you now in favor? So I hear this a lot from Western Conference executives. Reseeding is something that comes up a lot. Now,
it's never going to happen.
And I got this pushback from NBA guys too. Unbalanced scheduling, it doesn't work. You can't do it that way. But
it's never going to happen.
How long are we going to sit out there with a depleted Boston team being the 7th seed? when
Chris, the reason why it is never going to happen is because playoff money is serious money.
I know.
To pass something like reseeding in the NBA, you have to have a supermajority of owners vote for, we're just going to reseed and more Western Conference teams can get in than Eastern Conference teams. And the Eastern Conference team owners are never going to vote to cut themselves out of playoff money. So we can sit here and complain about it and people can say
I'm going to.
Fair. It is never going to happen. And it sucks for teams I feel like Minnesota is a great example of teams in that sort of tier of the Western Conference this year that are so good and so talented. And yet you put them in the pool they're in and we're saying it's not as likely. It's less likely than it is likely that they'll get back to the conference finals. And if they were in the East, you'd be sitting there talking about them as a finals contender.
You have to go pretty far down the Western Conference standings to find a team that you wouldn't make the front runner to win the Eastern Conference.
All right, tell me where
Oklahoma City, Denver, Houston. I'd probably put the Lakers in that mix because they have Luka, and we've seen Luka with lesser teams. Maybe I'd put them there.
I would. If you're putting Minnesota, you got to put the Lakers in.
Minnesota. I think the Clippers. Have beyond Kawhi, they've got some fit questions. Let's see how it all works out. I said to somebody this week, I get a little anxious when I hear about wow, I can't believe we got this guy at that price. Well, whenever you're counting on those types of guys, no matter how good they are or were, it's a little bit shaky. But I think the Clippers, if they're healthy, I'd put them on that list too. Golden State, maybe. Yeah. Is Golden State better than Cleveland? Would you put them in a 7-game series with the Cavs? Would you favor
in the
playoffs?
Warriors? Yeah. I mean, would they be better over the course of the season? I'm not sure I would make that statement, but in a playoff series, I just think that, all the stuff,
this is what I'm talking about.
Curry of it all comes in.
Cleveland's continuity is going to enable them to win 60 plus games, even with Darius Garland down for a while. Like, they might even be better early with Garland out because Lonzo Ball is such a good fit if he's healthy. Yeah, I mean, you got to get to like the 7-8 range before you start talking about, oh no, I'd take the Cavs or the Knicks or the Magic over one of them. It's that far down. It's crazy. But you're right. As always, these teams will not vote against their pockets. Nope. And their pockets say, keep the conference alignment the way that it is.
I mean, it's for the All-Star game too, by the way. When we keep talking about sort of how should they redo the All-Star game, and now they're going to have these 3 teams and the 1 international team and all of that. One of the things that is a hamstrung factor, one of the things that is hamstringing the league in terms of recreating the All-Star game is they need to have All-Stars from the East and West in the All-Star game. And we're going to see that come to the fore this February when they try to do an All-Star game and you look at the East representatives versus the West representatives and guys who don't make it in the West. But again, the Eastern Conference teams like having All-Stars. That is financially beneficial to them to be able to put on the advertisement, come see an All-Star tonight. So you will always see an equivalent number of All-Stars from the East and West, no matter how they organize the teams. The voting will be by conference. And again, that is an inflection point. We will see a lot of fans be like, this isn't fair. And guess what? It is never going to change.
Well, let's just put a bullet in the All-Star game then. I'm kind of in favor of that. Like this whole like world versus US team thing, Ryder Cup is how it's being framed. Like, it's fine. Like, I admire their efforts to try new things. Although, like, is anyone on the world team going to give a damn? Like, the biggest offenders towards not caring about the outcome of the All-Star game are international players. Like, go back and watch some Nikola Jokic tape of All-Star. Go back and watch some Luka Doncic tape of All-Star.
I wonder if they're all together and fighting for themselves, though. They'll play a little differently.
I don't know. You're not going to convince, like, I mean, these guys just played Eurobasket. Like, that's fighting for your country. That's fighting for your continent.
By the way, I do want to circle it all the way back to what we were talking about earlier. We have talked about Olympic teams being grounds for recruiting over the years, and obviously that's how the Heatles came to be. We have also seen several instances of all-star teams starting to be recruiting and when people got in each other's ears, and that was some of the beginning of the Kyrie KD conversations, right? It was because they were playing some all-star games and things like that. They were in the same place at the same time, even if they weren't in the same locker room. And I just think that we should look at the fact that this international team is going to be together for the All-Star game, and you're going to have Luka and Jokic and Giannis and some of these guys in the same locker room. And what is that going to mean the following summer? I'm very intrigued.
Some lip readers will be needed if these guys are having one of those KD, Kyrie hallway conversations. Right? That's for sure. All right, Rachel, good stuff. We'll do it again next week.
See ya.